We are truly living history. That's what I believe. And not only are we living history, but we have to make history. And what I say to people all the time is that we have to move unapologetically. And fear is a choice. You actually choose to be afraid. I never chose fear. I choose courage. Mahmoud Khalil was a message. Rumeysa, Ozturk was a message. Mohsen, Mahdawi is a message. And the message is supposed to be quiet, to let this go, to go into hiding, to stop speaking up for the Palestinian people. And I hope what they're going to realize is that it's not going to silence us.
Welcome to the Big Picture podcast. My name is Muhammad Hassan, and today we are joined by political activist, civil rights advocate, and grassroots organizer, Linda Sarsour. Sarsour was, in the past, the co-chair of the 2017 Women's March, which brought millions to the streets in a defiant protest of Donald Trump's first term in office. At the time, it was the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. In 2020, she published her memoir, We're Not Here to Be Bystanders. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Muhammad, for having me.
I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a while. There are few people that have their finger on the pulse of Palestinian-American life here in the United States, Muslim-American life here. You've been in the trenches for a very long time, and you've seen everything that's come and gone to this community, these many communities. So let's begin with what's happening right now and how you're feeling, how people around you are feeling.
This moment, Muhammad, for me is just a continuation of what I've seen and experienced that witnessed for the last 23 years. Everything seems to be new to people. They're watching these abductions, these deportations, these visa revocations, these targeting of communities, the chilling of free speech. I watched that all happen in the post 9/11 era when our community, our Muslim American communities here were just as horrified by the attacks of 9/11. We were also impacted. I'm a New Yorker. I was a college student, and it was something that was devastating to us all. And the United States government then betrayed us and basically made us into a suspect community. And so not only did we experience the horrific attacks of 9/11, we experienced the aftermath, the targeting of our communities, the detention of our sons, our brothers, husbands in our communities. We watched the chaos, the confusion of immigration policies, special call-in registration programs. I remember being a translator at 26 Federal Plaza in downtown Manhattan. So a lot of what we're seeing right now is a continuation of those policies. And when you're silent 20 years ago and you allow these things to happen, when you give up the due process of some communities, when you give up the rights of some communities for some false sense of safety, then you allow this to happen. And so this groundwork was already built. This foundation, the Department of Homeland Security was built. ICE was built in 2003, and we allowed it to happen. And here we are now. So I'm feeling, disappointed. I'm feeling, again, reminiscent of the days post 9/11 that I experienced, that I witnessed, that I organized in. But I know there's a lot of fear right now, and it's rightfully so. And I'm seeing the erosion of our democracy in the United States of America.
I wonder, starting your life, your career in that environment, at that age when you're entering the world for the first time, and this is what the world is telling you who you are and how you should behave. What did that teach you about what it meant to be an American, what it meant to be Palestinian, what it meant to be Muslim? And I wonder if some of those lessons you still carry with you today.
I came into organizing in the aftermath of 9/11 in a country that told me I didn't belong, that my faith was incompatible with, being an American. You couldn't be Muslim and American at the same time. That somehow the people that I was from, the people I prayed with, the people I lived with, somehow were more prone to violence, that somehow we were a danger to our neighbors. This is what we were being told in propaganda, in the media. There were entire wars being orchestrated based on lies that were going to impact, 1 million Iraqis that died because of lies and propaganda against Muslims, against Arabs, and so forth. And We lived in a country where, we passed the Patriot Act, where we were basically saying that we were going to go around and have loopholes on policies. So as long as the Muslims were being impacted by those policies, people who had delayed citizenship applications because they were in with the FBI for years at a time, men who were deported and separated from their families for no crimes at all. The U.S. said that they wanted to find terrorists after 9/11, but they didn't find them here because they were not here in the United States. We were a law-abiding, mostly immigrant community that just was trying to, build a better life for their families here than they could have built them in countries abroad. And so I came into this work in that way, and my response was, as a young person who was born and raised in New York City, is to be unapologetic. You are not going to take my faith from me. You are not going to criminalize my hijab. I was not going to be afraid to wear hijab now and walk the streets. And I found my voice to defend my community in the post 9/11 era. I was studying to be a high school English teacher. I was not studying to be an advocate or an activist. This is not a glamorous job. In fact, you get attacked often, you are smeared often, but I felt a sense of responsibility as a young Muslim American in a community that I loved very much. This is the only community that I knew. I was born and raised in a Muslim American community in New York City. And all these years later, I'm still here, 23 years later, and I'm still fighting the same things that I was fighting 23 years ago. We are still fighting for our full rights and dignity as Muslim Americans in this country, our full rights to worship. We still have fights in this country to build mosques. We still have, fights in this country about being able to wear hijab and work in certain companies and certain places. So every day it's been a fight. Our kids bullied in schools, public schools across this country. We're watching the attacks on Muslim students, Palestinian and Arab students on college campuses. So the fight continues. And so for me, the lessons that I've learned is you got to stay consistent. Regardless of what administration, I don't care if they're Republicans or Democrats, I have fought under both types of administrations consistently. I will critique any United States government if they are eroding or violating the rights of its citizens, including those from my community. And those are the lessons I learned. Not to be loyal to political parties, to be loyal to the communities you come from, to be loyal to the Constitution, and to be unafraid and unapologetic about it.
And you are somebody that has spent a lot of time in the public eye. For many people, you're one of the most visible Muslim women in America. And there have been times when you've been praised for that and championed, and then there are other times when you've been attacked. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that dichotomy of choosing to step out as a visibly Muslim woman, as a visible Palestinian into those spaces?
And that's important, Mohammed, because, I'm not an anomaly in my community. It's not that I come from some sort of oppressed, women in my community, and I happen to be the one that's not. There are so many incredible Muslim women organizers across this country, activists, masjid board leaders, people who are leading schools, professors, engineers, you name it, they're there. What became different for me is that I decided to go all the way outside, very public in my work and my activism, because it was important for me to have Muslim American women on the front lines, ones that wear hijab, to shatter every stereotype that propaganda was pushing against who Muslims were and how, in particular, women are treated in the Muslim American community. I also was, Palestinian. There's something about being Palestinian that just gives me a little bit more, rigor in the ways in which that I want to fight. And I have been championed by many, and I want to make sure that is, centered because it's true. But I have been more attacked than I've been praised. I have been a target of the right wing in this country. I mean, it's equal opportunity, right-wing Zionist, white supremacists, even liberals, neoliberals in this country don't like me either. There are some, what we would call traditional Democrats that don't like me either. So, and there are also Muslims who criticize me too. For some Muslims, I'm too progressive. For other Muslims, I'm not, progressive enough. So I'm just kind of in this space where I'm going to be my whole self, knowing that I'm going to get attacked from all ends. And there's different attacks. There's the attacks of people critiquing your positions, people who vehemently disagree with what you have to say. And then there are the ones that want to take your life. There's the ones that are going to threaten your family. There's the ones that are going to put your home address on the internet. There are going to be those who show up to places that you are. And so I've experienced it all. And the lessons that I learned is that I'm still here and I'm going to keep doing it, knowing that there are consequences that come with what I do, and I'm willing to take those consequences.
And as a Palestinian, I mean, I don't even know how to form this question because it feels like it's not big enough to be able to describe what this moment feels and what it has felt like. But I know Palestinians in different parts of the world, and Palestinians are a massive diaspora. And of course, the last year and a half, the last 18 months have been insurmountable. But there is something particular when I speak to Palestinian-Americans about what it has felt like to watch what is happening in Gaza, to watch what's happening in the West Bank from this vantage point. What has that felt like?
You know, the Palestinian diaspora, those of us who are in diaspora, are more than those that are in the West Bank and Gaza. And depending on where you are in the world, it depends on how complicit your country is. And what makes it so surreal for us as Palestinian Americans is that not only are we watching the live stream genocide of our people every day. Every day I open my phone and I'm watching children being blown up and tents on fire and hospitals and schools, and I'm watching mothers crying over children and fathers over their sons. It's the most horrific thing that I never imagined that I would experience in my lifetime. And then on top of that, my country is the most complicit in it. I'm an American and my taxpayer dollars are killing my own people, and that we have not been able to move any administration, Republican or Democrat, on this issue. What the only sense of hope that I have is seeing the sentiment of the American people. The majority of the American people are empathetic to the Palestinian people. More Americans are waking up to the horrors of the apartheid regime and the ways in which we unequivocally support it. You know, we have communities in this country, poor working class people, who are suffering from the shutdown of schools, of no access to health care, of poverty, of low wages. And all of a sudden, we just have billions of dollars laying around that we can just write a check to the apartheid regime of Israel anytime, at any moment, at any day, and Republicans and Democrats will support that. I think more Americans are saying, wait a minute, if we have billions of dollars laying around, why are we not funding our schools? Why are we not giving people access to health care in this country? Why are we not building more roads and more bridges? Why are we not building more mass transportation for people to get around? And so that's giving me a glimmer of hope. But I'm devastated every day. I'm outraged. I wake up in the morning grateful to be alive, but then immediately I'm perpetually outraged at my country because I am complicit in this. And it's because of my country that I'm complicit in the murder of my own people. I don't know how we as Palestinian Americans can look the people of Gaza in the eye and even show any type of, it's just complicated for me to even sometimes talk to people in Gaza who are telling us thank you and keep doing what you're doing and keep raising awareness and don't forget about us. But in the back of my mind and my heart tells me it is us that are complicit. We are the most complicit Palestinians of the diaspora when it comes to the genocide of the Palestinian people.
And this time last year, it felt like there was this wave building in this country and a lot of other countries, but particularly here. There were protests everywhere. There were people speaking publicly. There were the encampments that had just kicked off. And we're speaking now, the students at Yale University rebuilt their encampment yesterday. And it felt like there was a massive wave. Public opinion was shifting, as you said. There was so much pressure on the Biden administration to at least appear in public, to be saying the right things. And now it feels like some of that ground has been pulled back, and there is this climate. When I'm talking to people here, people are afraid. People are really uncertain. There are people that I have spoken to that are U.S. citizens that are walking around with their passports in their pockets because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know who's going to pull up.
I have my passport.
Really? I have my passport with me right now as well. What does that feel like?
You know, Mohammed, people are rightfully afraid right now. We're watching the crackdown of this administration on, protesters and those who are anti-genocide, pro-Palestinians in this country. They are, as you know, revoking visas. They are abducting, international students. Some of them also happen to be legal permanent residents of the United States. And these things are happening, of course, and are viral on the internet. We're watching these abductions on video. And so it is a scary time, and I don't want to take that away from anyone. But I also want people to learn lessons from here. During the last administration, we watched unarmed college students beaten bloody on their college campuses. We watched levels of law enforcement descend on encampments on college campuses of college students. What does a college student have? A book, a laptop? How dangerous were these college students who are basically saying, not on my watch, not in my generation will I be silent on genocide. These are students who are carrying on a legacy that has been long-standing in this country, whether it was students against South African apartheid, students against the war in Vietnam, and there are many, many other moments where students rose up on college campuses. This is where movements happen. Neoliberals criticize them, right? We criminalize these young people on the college campuses, and we allowed the media to criminalize them. I remember during the Columbia encampment, and as a New Yorker, I was watching regular news, like local news, watching CNN, watching MSNBC, and I would watch them focus on some people outside of the campus, who may have been a bit more aggressive in their language or may have been protesting outside. And then one day I got up from my house in New York and I said, I'm going to go bear witness with my own eyes. I don't want to know what the media has to say. I want to go for myself. And I go, Muhammad, to Columbia University encampment. Was the most incredible things I've ever seen. It's the world that I wanted to live in. Jewish students, Muslim students, black students, marginalized students, white students. They were even separating the food by nut allergies, worrying about someone might eat something that might harm them. When I walked into the encampment, they made me abide by rules. They said that would I be willing to abide by making sure that I cleaned up, that I took care of the environment that was around me, that I would respect everyone in their full identity that was in the campus. I was looking at them like, yeah, of course, absolutely. This is the world. I want to live in a world where people take care of the earth. I want to live in a world where people respect me for my full identity. These are the kids we're talking about here. And we allowed people to criminalize them. Even Joe Biden himself criticized the encampments across the country. So people who would be considered Democrats or liberals were also criminalizing these young people. And Democratic mayors were calling law enforcement on these young people. We watched them literally engage in physical contact with these students. We watched right-wing Zionists at UCLA literally come with sticks and beat our kids bloody. So yes, of course, it's scary now. Yes, of course, what the Donald Trump administration is doing is absolutely outrageous. But we laid the pathway. We allowed for the criminalization of these students for us to get to this point. So much of what Donald Trump is using are resources that were already available to him, a narrative that was already present before Donald Trump ever got here.
I'm sure you have conversations with a lot of these students, a lot of these people that may have taken part in the encampments or have not, and now they're at a point where they don't know what to do. When they look to someone like you for advice, what do you tell them in this moment?
I say to people, it's time for some of us to stand in the gap. If you are an American-born college student, this is your moment. This is your moment to step up, to be louder, and louder on behalf of your colleagues who are international students who may be afraid at this time, or legal permanent residents, or other undocumented students. This is our moment as an American-born myself. I feel like I have to step in the gap more. I've done everything that I believe I could, but there's always more that I can do. And so that's what I'm asking people with the privilege to be able to be loud in this democracy right now, to be able to stand up for the Palestinian people, to defend the students, to defend our right to free speech. And I tell those who are international students and others who feel afraid, first of all, you need to have a safety plan in place. Make sure you have people to contact. If there were something to happen, who would you call? Who on your college campus would you call? Who's your local little community that you've built for yourself? Make sure that you are not isolating yourself in this moment, that in fact, getting more deeper into community. And that doesn't mean being on the front line of a protest. To be in solidarity with the Palestinian people, it's not just about being on the front lines. There are many things and talents that international students have that can help in the movement. Some of them are incredible graphic designers. They can help make flyers and make things like that. Some of them are artists. You can make anonymous art to continue to contribute to a conversation. Anonymous posts on boards at your school to kind of continue to insert the voice of the Palestinian people and what's happening in Gaza. There's so much that you can do. Talking even in individual conversations, right, with classmates is important as we continue to educate people about the plight of the Palestinian people. So don't ever feel and underestimate the power that you have, even when you can't be on the front lines. And much of the international students have already risked so much for Palestine. You have nothing to prove to me. So don't feel like you're not doing enough. Don't feel like you have to go up and above and beyond. We want you to get a degree. We want you to be able to fulfill your aspirations that you came with to this country. And the rest of us, it's time for us to step up. It's time for us to sit in the gap. And so I'm proud to see the young people of Yale University who are stepping up again and saying, we're going back outside. And in response to something so outrageous, Muhammad, it was an impetus also of Ben Gvir coming to their campus. You have a war criminal that is walking around in the United States of America. Someone
Israeli Minister for National Security.
Yes, and someone who has been very clear and with his pro-genocide commentary. He wants to see the annihilation of Gaza. He wants to see the resettlement of Gaza. He has no remorse. He has no regard for Palestinian life whatsoever. And to have someone like him that is on our college campuses, while this administration and even the administration prior was accusing campuses of anti-Semitism and saying that there's rampant anti-Semitism or the promotion of anti-Semitism, but you allow a very explicit anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, pro-genocide foreign minister to walk our campuses and to tour our country in some pro-genocide tour to justify the actions of an apartheid regime is absolutely outrageous on every level. And I'm so proud that we have students who are willing, again, knowing that their schools are under attack, knowing that their schools could lose funding, knowing that some of them could lose status, are still willing to say, absolutely not. We are not going to stay silent on this.
And that idea of putting yourself in the gap is really interesting. And I want to read you something that you said 2 weeks ago at a New York rally for calling for the release of Mahmoud Khalil. And you were addressing the comments of the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. You said when Marco Rubio says that Mahmoud Khalil's politics are adversarial to U.S. foreign policy and American interests, I want to make it loud and clear, I too am adversarial. Tell me what you meant by that.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is using some, very vague, immigration law, saying that someone who has, for example, a green card or whatever, and is engaging in some sort of activity or politics that is, contrary or against or in opposition to a foreign policy, somehow like a crime, basically, which is why, Mahmoud Khalil is in detention in Louisiana. And I wanted to make it clear to this administration that they are delusional if they don't believe that majority of Americans are in fact opposition or oppose U.S. foreign policy. I've been opposing U.S. foreign policy since, I was conscious enough to understand U.S. foreign policy. And then when I was conscious enough even to know foreign policy before I was even born. When I think about all the unjust wars that we've been to, from at least in my lifetime, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, when I think about U.S. foreign policy when it comes to Palestine, Israel, so one-sided, so lopsided, so biased. When I think about the ways in which the United States government has engaged in geopolitics in the Middle Eastern region, right, and always seem to be on the wrong side, always on sides of dictators. Yes, we are adversarial to U.S. foreign policy. And, my comments then led to people being like, I should be deported and all that stuff. As you can probably imagine, it was a big firestorm. And I don't take it back. My positions are clear. I've been clear since I've been outside and visible in the last 23 years. I have the right as an American to criticize my government, to criticize the foreign policy choices of my government that has actually impacted the lives of people. This is not just a matter of disagreement. This is people's lives on the line. When we watched close to 1 million Iraqis die, and 20 years later someone says to us, oops, actually there weren't weapons of mass destruction, and almost close to an apology. This is not just, oops, I made a mistake. These are people's entire families, a country that was decimated. When I think about the Palestinian people, 76 years of occupation fully funded by the United States government. Yes, Marco Rubio, I am against that. And I will say that to you and anybody else. So to criminalize young people who are in college campuses, who are in an educational institution, this is the place where you are given ideas. You are taught history. And then it is you as a young person to make your own conclusions. And to say that Mahmoud Khalil, as a Palestinian refugee, can't come to the conclusion that U.S. foreign policy is not only bad for those that it impacts abroad, but it's actually also bad for American interests. The United States, when you go around the Middle East, just to be clear, it's not that exciting for you to tell people that you're an American. It's not something that is always celebrated in some parts of the world, particularly where there's been foreign policy that has impacted those nations. So I can't believe that we're sitting in a moment saying Mahmoud Khalil is a legal permanent resident sitting in a facility, in a detention facility, could not go and witness the birth of his child because he opposes U.S. foreign policy, because he's adversarial to U.S. foreign policy, ludicrous and outrageous, and should be unacceptable to anyone regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum. This is America. This is the place that sold our parents an idea that here's the place where you can come and you could be your whole unapologetic self. This is the land of the free and the brave. That people will tell us that, American soldiers are fighting wars around the world to protect my right, to free speech. And here I am in my country, in one of the most powerful democracies in the world, where I'm fighting for my own right to free speech in a democracy. It's outrageous on every level.
What do you think this administration wants to achieve with this wave of arrests? Mahmoud Khalil, Mohsen, Mahdawi, Rumeysa, Ozturk, a number of others. And then there's all of the other people that we haven't heard about. People that have had their visas revoked, people that have ended up in prisons in El Salvador. What is it that you think they're trying to achieve?
This administration is trying to chill free speech. They just want to chill. They're watching a wave. They're watching this kind of rise in the empathy for the Palestinian people. And again, this was already starting to happen prior when we saw the crackdown on the encampments. The right-wing Zionists, the pro-Israel lobby in America, they are losing. That's just what it is. And I know that people are probably thinking, how can I see light in this darkness? The light is that the pro-genocide, pro-Israel lobby, they are losing. And this is what you do when you lose, right? You try to find, you're in panic mode. And so what do? You're clasping down on trying to shut people up across the country, whether they are at corporations, whether they're at universities, whether they're students, whatever you can do to clamp down on this and then send a message to others. Mahmoud Khalil was a message. Rumeysa, Ozturk was a message. Mohsen, Mahdawi is a message. And the message is supposed to be quiet, to let this go, to go into hiding, to stop speaking up for the Palestinian people. And I hope what they're going to realize is that it's not going to silence us, and it's not going to silence students either. And so this is for them panic mode. This is how I experience this, as this kind of last gasp of, whatever little energy that they have. And what it's doing, it's backfiring. Because even regular people, I've been watching conservatives, people I vehemently disagree with on so many issues, be like, oh yeah, we have to draw a line somewhere. This right here is not okay. People are not okay with people getting abducted off the street. People are not okay with a young Turkish student who's being detained for writing an op-ed. It wasn't even an op-ed in the New York Times. It was in her school paper. The American people are waking up on both sides of the aisle, across the spectrum. And the pro-Israel lobby is losing. We're watching Pew polls that have come out showing that the public narrative is shifting, the public sentiment towards Palestinians is shifting, that the sentiment towards or support for Israel is fastly declining in this country. And so their way of trying to salvage whatever little they have left is by silencing us and escalating the fight against those of us who want to engage in free speech. And I say to people all the time, this is going to have the opposite effect. It's similar to when Palestinian voices or pro-Palestinian voices go to the college campuses, right? They want to cancel there's drama that happens. And usually when these events continue, even amongst the backlash, next thing you know, you go from an event with maybe 200 people to an event of 700, because now everyone's curious. They're like, what's all this chaos and drama about? And then they end up coming to the event and they end up saying, wait a minute, this is something that I agree with. I agree with liberty. I agree with freedom for the Palestinians. I don't agree with people being under occupation. I don't agree with people being in an open air prison. I believe in people's right to travel. I believe in people's right to education. This is just a normal, and I think it's because we carry the high moral ground. I don't have to engage in the dehumanization of any people in order to say that the Palestinian people deserve liberty and justice and freedom. They have to dehumanize Palestinians. They have to criminalize us. They have to make us out to be savage in order to justify the genocide, to justify the occupation, and justify the siege on Gaza. We don't have to do that.
If you turn back the clock 8 years, Donald Trump is just elected for the first time. By this moment, we haven't been 100 days into his administration yet, but by this point in time, 8 years ago in 2017, their country had seen mass protests. There were something like 5 million people that took part in the Women's March that you were instrumentally a part of. There were protests at airports to try and stop the arrest
Muslim
and detention of Muslims. There was a feeling that there was this rising energy to fight back against this administration. Why haven't we seen that this time around?
In the first administration, and this is a general problem of the American people who I am a part of and I love very dearly, is that when Donald Trump was elected the first time, for a lot of people in this country, most of whom were white women, it was as if Donald Trump had introduced these things to them: racism, sexism. They were almost feeling personally persecuted, disregarding the many decades and some for centuries in this country who have been fighting for rights in this country, right? Marginalized people that have been fighting forever. So then Donald Trump comes to office. All of a sudden, there's this energy of like, we have to go up against this tyranny. We cannot be silent in the face of this new administration. And also Donald Trump's administration was trying to figure it out too. Like, it was their first time in the White House, so they were trying to figure out what they can and what they can't do. As you know, in the immediate beginning of the Donald Trump administration, there were many resignations. It's a lot of moving pieces. And so for 4 years, the people were outside, and they were, our movements were large. We had recruited so many new people to the movement. And then all of a sudden in 2020, of course, COVID came, obviously that was part of it, but also we win an election, or we perceive to win an election, meaning that Donald Trump gets defeated. Everybody goes back to brunch. There's some sort of weird correlation between movement, for some people, movement and party. So for example, if there's a Democrat in the White House, must be fine. Everything's great. We have all the rights in the world. Everything's fine. And so you only see the very committed few, and there are in this country, committed organizations, committed organizers in different parts of the country who continue to organize regardless of administration. And then there are those that are only moved by the Donald Trump types. And then we come to this time, and we have a different problem. The different problem is that you have people who are now upset that Donald Trump became the president. And now they're blaming communities of color. They're blaming, Arab American voters, Muslim voters, maybe young people, and saying, this is what you asked for. If you should have done the right thing, and this is why we're in this situation. So there's still it's not even just the thing of like Donald Trump's administration is clasping down on the movement, which is why there isn't as much organizing. Yes, that's part of it. People are more afraid to go outside and go up against this particular administration. But that there are also others that are like, no, we're not going outside with you because we still blame you for an election that happened. You could have all did the right thing, except that narrative doesn't hold water. The data doesn't show that, right? Even if every person you thought should have voted in a place like Michigan from our community, Donald Trump won 7 swing states, all 7 swing states, including ones where there aren't large Arab and Muslim voter populations. Something is fundamentally wrong here. There is multiple reasons why someone like Donald Trump ascends into power. And instead of us dealing with the root causes of why that is, people are saying, this is what you get. And so in some cases, some people are saying, this is outrageous. We know it's wrong. But you also voted for that, even though we didn't. And so it's just I feel like we're like in a twilight zone. Like it's hard to explain. But this is some of the sentiments that you see, especially on the internet. People are like, this is what you voted for.
And I remember back in 2020, there was a feeling that there was a lot of divisions between people politically. People didn't know whether they wanted Joe Biden to be their representative. But there was a sense that, all right, put our differences aside. Let's try and get Donald Trump out of office. And that's the most important thing. And then last year, that feeling was really missing. And obviously, it's in the context of what's happening in Gaza and the Biden administration's role in it. But there was this fracture that I saw on a lot of people. And a lot of people told me, even within the Muslim community, that they didn't know who to vote for. There were people that were voting for Trump. There were people that were voting for Harris. There were people that were voting third party. And there was a lot of finger pointing. Do you think, in hindsight, with what's happening now, the people that I'm sure will come and tell you that, this is why we should have voted Harris into office, this is what's the lesser of two evils, look at what's happening now, do you think it was a mistake not to galvanize the community around trying to keep Trump from office?
as an organizer, people have to understand how we're organizing and who we're organizing. We are organizing a traumatized people that watched literally their loved ones in Palestine and Lebanon and Yemen who are literally being massacred. I'm talking about mass murder of people in Gaza. Watching videos. We had to organize through people listening to the commentary coming out of the White House, And even during the campaign, there was a moment where there was a sit-down interview where Kamala Harris was asked, what would you do differently than Joe Biden? And Kamala Harris's answer was, I wouldn't do anything differently. This is the messaging that people were listening to. And also, Donald Trump went to Michigan. He rolled into the mosque.
He went something like 50 times.
Yeah, many times to Michigan. And he went to the community. He went to the places where the community was. They also didn't do any vetting. They just rolled in. Whoever was there was there. And Donald Trump, of course, lied. And I knew that because I know Donald Trump very well. I know Trump. But he said to the people, hurt people, broken people, I will end this war. Now, you could say to people will say, he manipulated voters, and how could you, and of course, I'm not speaking on behalf of those voters or on behalf of myself, but in general, people will say, how could we let a, man like this manipulate us? He's a pathological liar. How would we even believe that he would, hold up his end of the bargain? And when you are people who are losing loved ones and watching videos of blown up children every day, and someone looks you in the eye and says, I'm going to end this war, I don't know what to say. Of course, no one in our community was encouraging the voting of Donald Trump. No electoral organizer that I know that's a Muslim American that's visible in this work, that runs an organization that actually does electoral work, was supporting Donald Trump or encouraging people to vote Donald Trump. Even when you look at the third party votes across the country, they just weren't there, Mohammed. The data doesn't lie. I mean, Jill Stein didn't even break 1 million votes nationally. So again, there's a narrative, this discussion, this fracture that happened that's not actually based on actually anything in reality. A lot of Muslim Americans in a place like Michigan decided and said, listen, since the party doesn't believe they need us, because the party said that. The party said we don't need Muslims in Michigan, which is why they did not invest in Michigan. They did not do any multilingual. I mean, Donald Trump had billboards all over Michigan. I saw them. I organized in Michigan. They did palm cards in the Arabic language, in Urdu, in Bangla. This is what they did. I saw it. I was there. So the Muslim American community, mostly in Dearborn, as an example, they said, okay, you don't need our votes, and we don't feel morally in this moment that we could vote for this top of the ticket. We think Joe Biden is an immoral, the administration has been immoral. We think Donald Trump obviously does not align with our values, and we don't believe that the third party has a shot to win. So you know what? We're going to vote down the ballot. And I actually saw that in the data, that people went down the ballot. They voted for school board members, local elected officials. I mean, in Dearborn, I saw the election of Amir Zahid, who's a Palestinian comedian lawyer, to the school board, and a Yemeni American named Jamal al-Jahmi. They won outstandingly in Dearborn because people went and voted. But some people didn't vote the top of the ticket. Now, we could go back and you can say, why didn't they do that and this and that? The onus is on those running for office, not on the voter. You have to earn votes from the voters. And we tried our best. We went out and we did the organizing. We knocked the doors. But you cannot force people to do something that they don't agree with or don't want to do. And so again, the Muslim American and Arab American, Palestinian American community, we did not elect Donald Trump. What I will say is that the Democrats failed us and failed our party and failed young people and failed college students, and they failed many communities who have been fighting for things for them to do. During the Joe Biden administration, they did not pass any comprehensive immigration reform. That was something that they had said they were going to work on. They told us that they were going to extend the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and protect voting rights. They were not able to do that as well. Criminal justice reform, there was something called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, couldn't do that. Roe versus Wade was overturned. In the first 2 years of the Biden administration, he could have codified Roe because he had a trifecta, didn't do that. So people are just disappointed. The party didn't come out unequivocally in support of federal minimum wage at $15, which, as you know, should be $30 by now. But let's just say $15. the people waiting for something. I knocked doors in Saginaw, Michigan, in a black community. I went to Pitt County, North Carolina. I don't just knock doors of Muslim voters. I knock doors of black minority voters, Muslim, Arab, folks that the party doesn't necessarily want to reach out to, people who are not what they call, consistent voters. I want to know why you're registered and you haven't voted in the last 2 elections. And people were like, look, no one came and knocked on my door in Pitt County. I went to Saginaw. They were like, you're the first people to knock on my door here. So there's there's a disconnect here. And we watched over $1 billion in the Democratic National Convention, or DNC, whatever, that were disappeared. And none of that went to the grassroots. None of that went into our communities. And so I don't want to say, Mohammed, and sit and blame and say this one and that one. I just know that there are root causes of how we got here. And if we don't start dealing with the root causes and stop with the very high level, shallow conversation about who voted for who, and understanding the rise of authoritarianism in America, of how many times we justified pieces of legislation that targeted Muslim Americans, that targeted nonprofit organizations. There are people in our community who are languishing in prisons under things like secret evidence. They don't even know why they're there because the government says it's secret evidence, and if they tell you, it breaches national security. We have people who, organizations that were shut down after 9/11, literally froze all assets, shut down organization. People were quiet about that. Special call-in registration. Muslim men who were over the age of 16 asked to come register with the United States government who were not U.S. citizens. It happened. Nobody really said anything about it. Patriot Act gets passed twice, right? Hillary Clinton was one of the ones that voted for it. People were, I guess if it's only targeting these people, if it's because of national security, I'm willing to give up my own rights for that. So again, we laid the groundwork here. And I think this is hopefully a wake-up call to the American people that when they go after one of us, it really does mean all of us eventually. And so I believe a lot of what we're seeing now is remnants of the post 9/11 era. And of course, other horrific policies in the past, like Japanese internment camps, right? When we're talking about, Chinese Exclusion Act, right? When we talk about mass deportations, the Repatriation Act, like we've done this before in this country. So when you're quiet before and then it comes back, it's something for us to reflect on as a people.
And for Muslim Americans and for the Arab American community, having gone through this similar experience in the aftermath of 2001, and now we've been 24 years, 25 years since then. Over that time, there is a whole generation like yourself and the people coming up after you that have, and maybe people that aren't, first generation or even second generation immigrants, people that have maybe the material and the personal means to be able to really engage with the system. You look at the climate now, and it feels like these communities still don't really have much of an impact, a mark on the political system. Why is that?
That's been the struggle of my life for 24 years. And we do see it in some pockets across the country. And we've seen, of course, the election of people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And we've seen it in the mayor of Dearborn and Abdullah Hammoud. And we've seen it in, state legislators across the country. We're seeing it now, of course, as you know, in New York, right, with the rise of a mayoral candidate in New York City, Zahran Mamdani. We've elected Muslims into the New York City Council. So in small pockets around the country, yes, we do have places where we've seen the impact of what it looks like when you organize as a Muslim American voter bloc, where you're able to, help elect people from our community who are aligned with our values, and also the support of people who are not from our communities but are aligned with our values, as we saw in the Cori Bushes and the Jamal Bowmans and the Summer Lees and Delia Ramirez's and many other members of Congress, or some of them now formerly members of Congress, who were supported by our community. But one of the reasons why we're not in the same place is because we have not yet been able to play at the same level as the pro-Israel lobby. I always say to people in our community all the time that the pro-Israel lobby doesn't have more money than we do. They're not smarter than we are. They don't understand how to play a political game that we don't know how to play. A lot of our resources as a Palestinian, Muslim American, and Arab American community over the years has went to charity, has went to humanitarian causes in the home countries that our families are from. The Muslim American community is probably one of the most charitable communities in the country, in the billions of dollars per year, where we are giving to causes everywhere, including domestically here, where we're supporting, cancer hospitals and supporting, food pantries and things in our own communities, schools, education, but also supporting, if you're from Egypt or from Yemen or from Palestine or from Syria, just millions of dollars in humanitarian aid. At some point, we're going to have to create a formula where we continue to be charitable to our home countries and making sure that we are alleviating poverty and harm, but also understanding that we also have to organize our resources politically in this country. In this country, there are only two things that work: money and votes. If you have money and you're using your money politically, and also if you are able to demonstrate power in numbers, this is how things move. A lot of people have hope that this democracy works on a foundation of morals and values. It doesn't, unfortunately. Sometimes I would ask members of Congress questions about Israel, right? Confidentially. I say, explain to me here. Like, some of them don't really have any personal connection to the state of Israel. They don't have any reason to support the state of Israel. But over the course of time, some of them have hard times fundraising. They don't come from communities of money. So when you have a group of people that's offering you fundraising opportunities, right? When AIPAC is putting money on the table or their affiliate PACs are putting money on the table, it unfortunately causes you to feel obligated in order to win an election or a re-election to take those types of resources. Similarly to the pharmaceutical industry, the fossil fuel industry. People are taking money because they need to have money in order to compete in these elections. And that's why there's a big movement in the U.S. around money out of politics. But right now, money is in the politics. And so I tell our community, we can't just say money out of politics while the money is in the politics. Now, at some point, we wish we were in a country where money was out of politics, but we have to compete. And I think the genocide sent a very strong message to our community that we have to start organizing PAC money. We just have to. There's no way around this here. And remember, I tell our community is, a lot of times people don't want to, take on the characteristics of their opposition. They don't want to do what the opposition does. And my response to them is to say, look, we are using our resources to push messages of justice, of freedom, of liberty for people around the world. They are pushing money to justify genocide and apartheid. So yes, we are playing the same game as them, but we are playing it with universal values that our neighbors will agree with. And so I don't feel, dirty about it. I feel like we are using a tool that is currently available at this time to promote our ideals and values around freedom and justice, whether it be to defend our rights in this country or to defend the rights of Palestinians to live in dignity in Palestine or anywhere around, or to defend Uyghurs or Rohingyas and so many others, Sudan, Congo. We have to play that game. So I think the reason we're delayed in the process, and that's the problem. We are delayed. I think there's a new generation of young Muslim Americans who are much more political, who also don't have the type of baggage that some of our parents and grandparents came with to this country. We also have a much more fundamental understanding of the ins and outs of government. We know what the inside looks like. We know what the outside looks like. And we're building a strategy here. I think last year, again, we were trying to build a strategy amidst a genocide during a very consequential presidential election. And sometimes people couldn't see beyond the bloodshed. They just couldn't see it. They couldn't bring themselves to that place. And we can fault them all we want, but we have to at some point sit for a minute and reflect on what those people were witnessing, what they were hearing, and someone that just looked them in the eye and said, there is nothing that I can do for your loved ones. This bloodshed will continue. And on top of that, sending billions of weapons to the state of Israel, even during a democratic administration. So for some people, it's like, what's the difference here? And so I think we're on a better path now.
But that's a big question too. Like, if people feel like they don't have a place in the political system at all, if there are overarching interests, whether they're foreign interests, strategic military interests that will always override everything, how do you encourage people like that to say, no, you actually can have an impact?
I believe in the philosophy of all politics is local. I teach our people, this is literally my whole job. My whole job is to teach people that the local politics in your community, what directly impacts, right? It's the ways in which your schools are operating. So we have to be involved in school board elections, right? It's how the curriculums are developed. It's how your children will be seen inside of your public school systems. It's your local city council members and how they appropriate funding to your health system, to your education system, right? Things that actually impact you every day, your property taxes, like the things that are impacting your daily life. Once people start experiencing local politics, they involve themselves in local politics, they actually start feeling it much more directly than when you engage on the federal level. Unfortunately, in this country, people come around every 4 years. You know, even our community, they're talking to me about a presidential election every 4 years. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was like, what did you do last year? What did you do the year before that and the year before that? Every year there's an election in your city, whether it's for a local office, mayor, gubernatorial race, a Senate race. This is where a lot of the decisions are being made. This is also where a lot of the anti-boycott legislations happen. They happen in your state legislator. You want to protect women's rights, you do that in your state legislator. You want to provide legal services to immigrants, that happens in your state. Like in New York City, we have laws that allow access to legal services for undocumented people, for example. In New York City, we have laws that say that New York City must provide translation in hospitals, in government agencies, in the school system. This is things we've passed. In New York City, we passed as you know, New York City is the largest public school system in the country that actually recognizes Muslim holidays. So the schools are closed for everybody on Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. This was a local campaign in our local community, one that sent a message to Muslim students and said, you belong here. You are part and parcel of the New York City public school system. Your faith that you follow is one that will be recognized and respected. And so we will close down our schools in recognition of those holidays. So the power of local politics. And when you start giving people wins like that, people say, wait a minute, okay, hold on a second here. You raise the wage. So now we go from, New York $7 an hour to $15 an hour, for example. This is people's pockets. You're actually giving people, helping them to thrive more than they were able to before. So all politics is local to me. And then when I come back to people in 4 years and say, there's a presidential election, it's a different type of engagement. Then people want to engage me because now they saw that my going to the polls matters. My vote actually matters. And so I tell our people, got to stay consistent between the 4 years. If you come out if the Democratic Party just waits every 4 years to come outside and start telling us we got to vote for the Democrats, this is not going to work for our people anymore.
How do you make a party like the Democratic Party pay attention and listen? What does that look like? We saw last year there were clear disconnects of where the party understood what the Muslim and Arab communities wanted them to say, and they were not willing to do it.
The party has a lot of work to do. And I don't even know if they have enough time to do it, because we're coming up on a 2026 midterm elections. This is an opportunity for us to elect more Democrats, to at least break the trifecta that this government has. So that could at least block some legislation that could be more permanent. Then you have the 2028 election. It's not that far away. It's literally like in my political calendar, it's tomorrow. So the party has a lot to do, and I don't know if many in the party have learned their lesson from 2024. In fact, right now they're watching internal tension. David Hogg, who, as many people know, was one of the survivors of the Parkland shooting in Florida, who became a vice chair of the DNC. He's a young white, progressive, came out, a few days ago and said that he's going to run a campaign, a $20 million campaign against current Democrats, incumbent Democrats, who have been cowardly, basically, under this administration. And so we're watching people on the inside. That's what it's going to require. It's going to require Democrats in the party to rebel in the party and say, listen, if you don't get your house in order, either we're not going to be a part of this party, or you're going to have to know that you're going to lose again. And so the party needs to reckon. The bottom line is, if the Democratic Party wants to be the big tent party, then they got to start acting like it. The party has to understand that unity is not uniformity, and that they're going to have to be open enough to have a party where people in the party disagree. There's a lot of issues people disagree on. People disagree on even around issues of criminal justice reform. There are people in our party that believe things like we don't need police and prisons, that there are alternative methods to lowering crime and to rehabilitate people who've engaged in behavior that is criminal or whatever. There are people who don't agree on immigration, for example. There are people who say abolish ICE. Some people say, I don't know, we might not want to do that yet, whatever. The point is that we should have a party where we can have these discussions, we can have these debates. So as long as we're aligned on universal values and principles, everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. No one in our country should die because they don't have access to health care. People shouldn't have to have 2 to 3 jobs to just be able to support their families. There are fundamental things that we do agree on. Most people agree that we should not be worried that our children are going to get shot in schools, like very fundamental, basic things. And then there are other issues that may be more complicated. We can get into a debate on that. Until the party decides that's the kind of party they want, where you can bring people together to have a debate of ideas, but we do share universal values, that's the only time they're going to win. Our community is not coming back to the party because they are scared of Donald Trump. Our people are still going to have to be convinced that there is a party in this country that is going to, number one, value them as people, as Americans, address their issues, which are often things that people assume about our communities, right? They think because we are, many of us are children of immigrants or immigrants ourselves, that we only care about Palestine or we only care about Congo and Sudan or Yemen and whatnot. We also care about healthcare. We care about high quality public education. We believe in things like access to higher education in this country. We believe that there should never be any child in the United States of America who goes to bed hungry at night. So these are things that we also agree on. Sensible gun reform in this country. We believe in comprehensive immigration reform. We believe that if someone that has been in this country, that has paid their taxes, paid their dues, that your children have went to our public schools, that you should have a pathway to citizenship. So again, let's work on the things we agree on. You may not agree with me on these things over here, but there are fundamental things that we agree on. So again, the Democratic Party has to reckon with that. And if they continue to, take their advice from white consultants who don't understand the needs of the diverse voters of their party, they're going to just lose again and again and again. And I am not going to allow them to put that responsibility on the voters and responsibility on the organizers. It is not my job to make the Democratic Party look good. It is not my job to earn votes for the Democratic Party. My job is to be a messenger to the people. And you have to give me the message and you have to give me the commitments. I cannot make commitments on your behalf. And so unless they change that, they're doomed to fail again.
And you were campaigning not so long ago for Senator Bernie Sanders when he was running for president. And he's somebody that, despite not winning, ends up shifting a lot of those conversations internally when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to unions and workers' rights, and a lot of very domestic politics that impacts a lot of people. He ends up making space for a new generation of lawmakers to come through, like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Cori Bush, and then just even over the last month, he's been campaigning around the country. One of the very few, very vocal Democrats that are speaking out and really rallying people. But then there's a lot of people in the Muslim and American community, the Palestinians, that look to him at one point in time as their person, the person that they could rally around, that can speak on their behalf. And then over the last 18 months have felt let down, even betrayed by somebody who they thought was going to be their champion and ultimately wasn't. How do you feel about someone like him?
In the beginning of the genocide, I'm not going to lie to you, politicians are all flawed human beings, and Bernie Sanders this is not the first time he's been flawed. He was flawed even when I was supporting him during the campaign. And in fact, we didn't always see eye to eye, even on Palestine, even as someone who kind of was probably the only presidential candidate, at least in my lifetime, that really centered the Palestinian people and sometimes said things that no one asked him to say, or he would just say it for saying it. It just showed you how low the bar was for us as Palestinians and as Arabs and Muslims in this country, that we were very enamored by just someone saying, you exist, you're here. Like, Palestinians deserve dignity and freedom. This should be a normal thing and statement that anybody should make. What's wrong with saying that Palestinians are human beings and deserve to be free, right? And I love Bernie Sanders, and I know that a lot of people are criticizing him in this moment. There's been some videos of people, for example, unfurling flags at his recent rallies, and interestingly enough, the beautiful part about it was the entire audience that was at his rally was like, free Palestine. Like he should have took a signal there that he's in the right place, that these people that you are rallying in this Trump country that he calls Trump country are in fact empathetic with the Palestinian people. There could have been a different response to those protesters who are trying to find any way to continue to elevate the plight of the Palestinian people. When someone goes to a rally to unfurl a banner, it is not fanfare for them. It is another kind of media opportunity, another way to like recenter Palestine in a conversation as we're now slowly forgetting that there is an ongoing genocide. But Bernie Sanders is still doing important things, and you can't take that from him. I mean, twice already just in the past year, he has put forth joint resolution of disapproval against weapons sales to Israel and sending weapons to Israel, and was able to convince other Democratic senators to vote along with him. This is just not a thing that has ever happened before. Sometimes you would have one standing alone, Bernie himself, and now you had one vote was about, 15 of them or 18 the first time, and unfortunately it was 14 the second time. But the point is, there are other senators that are starting to take his lead, like the Chris Van Hollens of the world, like the Markeys. There are more people willing to say the things that Bernie has been saying for a really long time. And so, yes, we criticize politicians. No politician's ever a champion for me. They are never people who I see as my, saviors. They are not. Bernie Sanders is not the savior of the Palestinian people, nor is he the savior of workers or anyone else. He has a job, and his job is that he is a politician. And a politician has a specific job. They are speaking within a system that we are not a part of. And he is by far the most oppositional to the state of Israel and to Benjamin Netanyahu. And a lot of people will say he doesn't go far enough, but he goes the farthest, unfortunately, right? So that's the kind of balance that I bring to myself when I'm having this conversation with people, is that Bernie's not the organizer with us outside. We got to put him in his context. And in his context, he's doing, more than anyone has done, unfortunately. Even though, like I said, the bar is low, but he's done more than a lot of people have done. And so we can critique Bernie, but I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. We have to recognize when people do right and be, grateful and encourage them to do better. And when we feel like they're not doing the best that they can, that we call them in. Bernie is a person to call in versus the call out, because I think Bernie has done a lot for Palestine, at least on the narrative level. For example, when I was a surrogate on the Bernie campaign, I was the first woman in hijab ever to be a visible national surrogate for any political campaign. And I remember one time they sent me to Wisconsin. And it was in Madison, Wisconsin. Madison, Wisconsin is not really home to a large Palestinian, Arab, or Muslim community. So I actually said to them, don't you want to send me to Michigan or something? Why are you sending me to Chicago or send me somewhere else? They were like, no. They were like, we need you in Madison. And I was like, okay. I was like, that's fine. So I went. And I kept trying to have this conversation with them, and they were basically like, wait a minute, do you think that you're on this campaign because we want to use you to get Muslim and Arab and Palestinian votes? And I was like, yeah, of course, that's what surrogates are for. We each come from different constituencies. They said, no. They said, your voice is powerful here. And the campaign encouraged me to be in spaces where the people I was talking to were not people like me. They wanted my voice to be amongst other progressives and in white communities, and sending me to places like Wisconsin and sending me to New Hampshire and some of these places where otherwise some of these people would never hear voices like mine. So again, I know Bernie personally. I think Bernie has, personal things when it comes to this particular issue of Israel-Palestine. People know his history and his story. As a Jewish politician, just someone who's Jewish himself and has, history with family and the Holocaust. There's a lot going on here. And sometimes, I give him grace in ways that others don't. And I know that he can be better. And I know that all politicians can be better. And Bernie is not excluded from that.
I think that image that you painted at one of his rallies, and many people have seen that video of someone attempting to unfurl the flag and then security coming and taking them away, and then people chanting, that to me feels like a metaphor for what's happening in this country right now. You have what's happening on the streets, in the public, especially with this young generation, and then you have what is happening in the political space. And they feel like they couldn't be further apart. You have what people are seeing and saying on their social media, and you have what they're watching on their television screens in the news, nightly news bulletins, and they couldn't be further apart. They feel like different worlds. What does it take for these two worlds to combine, and what does it take for the sentiment of people in this country ultimately to affect what happens in power?
It's starting. I think it's starting. And, sometimes it takes a Donald Trump, to see any utility in a Donald Trump. It actually galvanizes the people. It gives them one symbol. I think in the previous administration, there were people who were so loyal to Joe Biden, or they were such loyal Democrats that they could see no wrong, in the administration. They justified everything that Joe Biden did. Oh, it's because of this reason, that reason. He's trying his best. He's doing all that he can. And now you have, this boogeyman, right, Donald Trump, who Democrats abhor no matter what he says and does. Like the man is always wrong no matter what. And so sometimes you need a galvanizing figure like a Donald Trump to bring people together. And now you're seeing people, again, even on the abductions of the students in particular, where people are saying, oh, absolutely not. This is absolutely outrageous. People who are speaking out in ways that I've never seen them speak out before. Even people who are leaning in on the Palestine issue by saying, I can't believe that, Donald Trump is saying these things or doing these things, especially around, Donald Trump's commentary around Gaza and saying things like this is, beautiful Riviera front, and an insinuation that, the United States somehow will end up taking over Gaza. People were beyond themselves, even people that I don't agree with usually. And so again, unfortunately, Donald Trump could be potentially helpful in us shifting things even faster than we want. Although there's a lot of darkness, harm, and suffering that's going to come. And as you've seen, it's already happened so much in just a little short period of time. But I also see the college students. I mean, the work continues. I went to a rally on April 5th in Washington, D.C. There were two rallies that were happening. One was called Hands Off. And it was like hands off Medicaid, hands off my Social Security, hands off, free speech, whatnot, more like multi-issued. And at the same time, there was a rally in D.C. called March for Palestine. I went to the Hands Off rally, and I noticed at the Hands Off rally, it was quite older, quite whiter. And then I went to the March for Palestine rally where I spoke. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. First of all, people were outside. It was, 20,000 people, which is a lot. And I thought actually would be much smaller because I thought people would be worried and scared and the crackdowns. But it was younger. It was more diverse. It was, they were indigenous, they were black, they were Latinos, they were different types of Arab Americans, different types of Muslim Americans. They were our older Jewish, allies that have been with us outside for, decades. There were a newer, younger Jewish anti-Zionist generation that was outside. It was incredible. And so I was looking at these two rallies, and then I looked and I said, this March for Palestine, this is the country that I want to live in. I want to live with these kinds of people. And I know that there are a lot of those people that are out there. I think that the problem we have in this country, and we've always had this since the foundings of this country, the silent majority. I fundamentally believe that the majority of the American people are good people. There are people who believe in fundamental principles and values of dignity and respect and being able to thrive and people being able to reach their dreams and aspirations. I think that it's their silence that it has made this country as dangerous as it is right now. But I know that if the silent majority decides one day to say, you know what, I'm not going to be silent anymore, I'm actually going to profess the things that I believe, we would absolutely not see any of the things that are happening in our country. All the bad things would cease to exist if the silent majority stepped in.
My final question to you, Linda, is when you look at the landscape that you have before you, the climate that's happening in this country, everything that we have been witnessing day in, day out in Gaza play out over the last 18 months, it feels like this is a historic moment in a lot of ways. And the stakes feel like they're high, and people are, as we talked about, afraid and uncertain. You as an organizer, as somebody that has been doing this for a while, somebody that is in the minutia of what happens in local politics on the streets, how do you meet this moment?
We are truly living history. That's what I believe. And not only are we living history, but we have to make history. And what I say to people all the time is that we have to move unapologetically. And fear is a choice. You actually choose to be afraid. I never chose fear. I choose courage, because I know that there have been people before us in this country who've sacrificed for me to be here today. There's a reason why I'm able to do the work that I do. There's a reason why I have the right to vote in this country, the right to protest, the right to assemble, because people died in this country for that right. And I always say to people that I know, and I have come to the conclusion in my life, that I'm fighting for things that I may not experience myself. I may be not able to, eat the fruits of my labor. And that's okay with me, because I know, Muhammad, that one day a little Palestinian girl in this country will. A little Muslim girl one day will. I know that a little Palestinian child in Gaza one day will be free, and they will be playing on the beaches of Gaza. And I may not be alive to see that. I hope I will be, and I feel that I will be. But that gives me the satisfaction of continuing to do this work. So I tell people, you have to keep going, because somebody before you kept going, even though they knew it was hard, they knew there were consequences, but because of them, we're here. So I do not take that lightly. And this moment is, you meet it with bravery and courage. You meet it understanding that we all have a purpose here. And all of us are going to have different roles to play. Not everybody has to be me or be on the outside. But for me personally, I'm going to continue to organize. I'm going to speak. I'm going to accept every consequence that comes my way. I am, I just feel resolute. I feel clear-eyed. I understand the fear that is out there, because this administration is tangibly doing things that make people afraid. But I'm not afraid. This fight is worth it. Fighting for democracy is worth it. Fighting to free the Palestinian people is a worthy and just cause for me. And I'm willing to sacrifice everything I have for it.
It sounds like a message of hope.
Oh, I listen, after the darkness, Muhammad, the light always comes. I keep telling people, with hardship comes ease. And I promise people that we keep going, we're going to get on the other side of this. And inshallah, the other side is freedom and liberty, not just for the Palestinian people, but for all people.
Linda Sarsour, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Big Picture, and a huge thank you to Linda Sarsour for being our guest today. As always, you can listen to this episode and all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts from. And until next time, I'm Mohammed Hassan. Salam.